Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here this afternoon with all of us who are very excited, very pleased, and very appreciative of the fact that Act 33, what was Senate Bill 209, is in effect here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. The Ignition Interlock for first-time offenders. Pennsylvania has now joined some 40 other states for Ignition Interlock for first-time offenders. The core function of government is to provide for the health, safety, and welfare of its residents. That's exactly what Act 33 does. We make sure that our residents can travel our highways in a safe manner. And Act 33 remembers those who were injured or lost their lives because of drunk drivers. This is a memorial to them. Let them know that Pennsylvania has not forgotten them and is taking the steps to make sure that we can curb that type of behavior going forward. This year, Senate Bill 290 was able to pass both chambers unanimously in the Senate, only one negative vote in the House. And why am I so passionate about this bill? In 2015, there were 12,884 alcohol-related crashes in Pennsylvania. Crashes. And over 300 alcohol-related deaths. Translates to one death a day due to someone driving under the influence of alcohol. Our laws weren't strong enough. And we went on a charge and a crusade to make sure that we had Ignition Interlock passed in Pennsylvania. And I couldn't have done it without the support of the people standing behind me here today. Certainly my colleague on the Transportation Committee, Senator John Wozniak, Senator Scarnati, Senator Corman, Senator Costa, leadership in the Senate working with us, Senator Stefano, Senator Bartolotta, Senator Lloyd Schmucker, who were champions and advocates for this legislation in the Senate going forward. And in the House, we had true, passionate allies. And Representative Keith Greiner, who introduced the bill in the House of Representatives as well. Representative Jim Marshall, who was in charge of the Subcommittee Transportation for Highway Safety. Representative John Taylor and Representative Bill Kelleher, the chairs of the House Transportation Committee. My friend and colleague, Representative Becky Corbin from Chester County. We both know families that have lost loved ones on account of drunk drivers, and Becky was one who immediately took the charge. And Representative Christine Phillips Hill, who was a huge success and advocate for us in the House of Representatives as well, to make sure that we got the bill through the House, got it back over to the Senate, where we had a little tweak to make, and then we got it to the governor for his signature. Senator mentioned Senator McGarrigle couldn't be here with us, but they're also very big supporters, and I want to thank them, and Senator Rob Teplitz, whose district we're in, for their support as well, and most especially the families of the DUI victims here with us today. May their loved ones never be forgotten, and may they look upon this bill as a first step in honoring them going forward in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Act 33, the Ignition Interlock, restrictions to first-time offenders who are convicted with a blood alcohol content of level 0.1 or higher will take effect in about 15 months. PennDOT needs that time in order to do the paperwork that they need. We're hoping we get it done sooner, but we gave them up to 15 months to get their system in place as well. Under these new terms, individuals could apply to PennDOT and be issued an Ignition Interlock limited license so that they can drive to work, pick up their children from school, take them to softball games, baseball games, all in a controlled environment. That is, they have to blow into the Ignition Interlock system for the car to start. If they register alcohol content on their breath, the car will not start. We join our 40-some other states now with the Ignition Interlock. The Ignition Interlock system is far-reaching and a life-saving event for Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Statistics have shown that merely suspending a license for first-time DUI offenders does not work. In many instances, the police will tell us they continue to drive with a suspended license, endangering people on the highway with a suspended license and the chance that they may go back to drinking and driving. But this Act 33 allows first-time offenders to drive in that controlled environment. Because of the effectiveness of ignition interlocks, more than 78,000 driving attempts were stopped in Pennsylvania between 2013 and 2015. 78,000 people that would have been behind a wheel of a car or a pickup truck or an SUV driving drunk. We've seen in a number of states, the number of DUI incidents is reduced by some 30%. As well as allowing a person to continue on in a controlled environment to provide for their family, we're hoping that it makes many of them realize that some of them may have issues regarding alcohol and that they should seek the medical attention that they need so that they won't further embarrass themselves or endanger people on the highways. And with this controlled system, it allows us to once again keep our highways safer for those who travel throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. It's a most significant and important piece of legislation, this ignition interlock, this simple device to keep our highways safe and to keep those Pennsylvanians and those visitors assured that there's not a drunk driver on the highway with them. Now I'd like to ask to come to the podium my partner with the ignition interlock, the gentleman who prime sponsored the bill in the House of Representatives from Lancaster County, Representative Keith Greiner. Keith?
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I really do want to thank everyone for taking the time to come out. It's feels like a fall day. I wasn't sure this was going to be inside or outside, but it's nice to be outside. As Senator Rafferty just said, Act 33 of 2016 is a victory for roadway safety across the Commonwealth. The expanded use of ignition interlocks is an issue now that has been considered in the General Assembly for many years now. And Senator Rafferty has led that charge for the past three of the House sessions, 6 years at least. And he's tirelessly worked with our colleagues in both the Senate and the House to ultimately bring us here today, to recognize the importance of this legislation becoming law. I cannot understate how important this legislation is. The use of ignition interlocks is unquestionably going to save lives and make our roadways safer here in the Commonwealth. Driving under the influence is a reckless crime, one that endangers all of the other fellow drivers on the highway and far too often ends in senseless tragedies. In Lancaster County, my home county, DUIs are roughly 1/3 of all the criminal cases handled in the Court of Common Pleas. Think about that. 1 in every 3 crimes in my home county is someone driving drunk. Unfortunately, those who exercise poor judgment and get behind the wheel after drinking often commit the crime on numerous occasions before they're even caught and prosecuted. But it doesn't stop there. A vast number of those who are sentenced for driving under the influence actually are going to do it again. Under current Pennsylvania law, most first-time DUI offenders will receive a license suspension, which too often, unfortunately, is not enough to keep them from getting behind the wheel. Offenders still have to live their lives, go to work, and raise a family. Act 33 changes this. Rather than a simple license suspension, it requires first-time offenders to use the ignition interlock system. It allows them to continue living their lives while ensuring they are driving safely and not under the influence of alcohol. The price to install and maintain an ignition interlock device is well worth the price to prevent future tragedy and for an offender also to continue their lives. Most importantly, it provides surety when they drive that they are sober. Act 33 is a comprehensive update to Pennsylvania's DUI laws, addressing a number of issues including charges of tampering with an ignition interlock device, ensuring that any vehicle operated by someone with an ignition interlock limited license will only use a vehicle properly equipped with that interlock device, and clarifies a number of other technical issues with our DUI laws. As the prime sponsor in the House, it has truly been an honor to be part of a team effort to make this possible, and it truly has been a team effort. As Senator Rafferty said, I want to thank our House Transportation Committee Chairman, Representative John Taylor, and Representative Bill Keller. And I want to reach out to the House Judiciary Committee Chairman also, Ron Marsico and Joe Petrarca, for working together to create the Joint DUI Task Force, whose members in the House worked diligently to consider this legislation. This task force was joined by my colleague who's standing behind me today, Representative Jim Marshall. I wanted to thank him, and I wanted to thank my other members who are standing behind me for their role in helping to move this legislation forward in the House. And last but not least, I have to thank Chris and Susan Demko and for all the work they've did, Mothers Against Drunk Driving and Parents Against Impaired Driving, for their steadfast advocacy on this issue. Without the efforts of Chris and Susan, and there were other families here, other parents, but I will say they live pretty close to my office, and their daughter was killed in a senseless tragedy about a mile from my office. I remember that day. I remember it vividly. I also remember the Demkos writing to the newspaper, and I remembered vowing to do everything that I possibly could to see whether we can do something to get this legislation passed. And I do want to give a shout out too to my senator in my district, Senator Smucker, because Lloyd was very involved in this too, and I reached out to him, and as I said, we all worked together to move this forward. Once again, I do want to thank Senator Rafferty. He was tenacious in moving this forward. It has taken years. I think people know here in Harrisburg sometimes things can take a long time to get done, but this is something that needed to get done. And with his unwavering leadership, we were able to get this passed. I will say that while we're discussing Act 33 today, we also need to remember that there's always more that we can do to combat drunk driving and impaired driving here in the Commonwealth. And I'm making it a promise today that I'm going to continue to fight for reforms and to look for legislation that we can do to pass in the Commonwealth to strengthen our DUIs. Thank you very much all for being here.
Thank you, Keith. And they have joined us, Chairman Taylor, Chairman Keller from the House. We thank them for their strident support in this legislation. And when we began to craft the Ignition Interlock, we did hearings throughout the Commonwealth. And we heard the heart-ripping testimony of families who lost their loved ones. And we had law enforcement involved as well, especially I want to give a shout out to the District Attorney for Lancaster County, Craig Stedman. Craig was instrumental in working with us on this legislation and addressing the needs for Ignition Interlock and for closing some of the loopholes on DUI legislation, which we did last session. We were able to effectively close loopholes on repeat offenders, so they're now sentenced for each of their violations. Instead of coming in, letting them accumulate and going in for one, they're now sentenced for each of their violations, which is a real plus for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, keeping our highways safe. Certainly, my colleague and my partner in the Senate of Pennsylvania was a big supporter of this legislation, worked very carefully and closely with me on making sure that Act 33 was passed. Senator John Wozniak.
Thanks, Senator Rafferty. Senator Rafferty, I have to say, is one of the biggest champions of anything transportation-wise. And for the victims and the families of the victims behind me, if you drink, don't drive, call a cab, call Uber, or have a designated driver. With Act 33, I'll make this very quick and concise. It gives the person who have violated Pennsylvania law the opportunity to continue to make a living. It makes our roads safer, and hopefully it'll be that behavior modification that will prevent that individual from driving drunk again. I want to congratulate the representatives, the senators, and especially the people standing behind me who were the motivators to pass this legislation, and I'm glad that we finally joined the majority of the other states to come into the 21st century. Thank you, John.
This has been the #1 legislative priority of Mothers Against Drunk Driving for the past 6 years when I've had this bill introduced in the Senate, and we finally effectively got it passed in the Senate and the House to the governor. Mothers Against Drunk Driving were great, enthusiastic supporters of this legislation, done a marvelous job in educating all of us, not only just in the Commonwealth, but throughout this nation, of the dangers of driving under the influence and the sad occurrences that come into being because of someone's poor choice. With us today from Mothers Against Drunk Driving is Colleen Sheehy Church. Colleen?
That's okay. Thank you, Senator Rafferty. And 8 years is actually the amount of years that this legislation has been working so tirelessly to get this act passed. As you know, MAD itself has been advocating for change for 36 years, but we are only successful when we get to work side by side with committed leaders like you, Representative Greiner, Senator Smucker, and all of the legislators who supported this Ignition Interlock law. With smart, life-saving laws like this one in place, I truly believe, we will eliminate the completely preventable violent crime of drunk driving in Pennsylvania and across the entire nation. As a mother who lost her son to a drunk driver, I speak for the thousands and thousands of other families when I say we must continue the tireless efforts until we can all say there are no more victims. No family should endure the overwhelming sense of despair and anger that comes from losing someone because of one person's selfish decision to drink and drive. No one should have to ask why our laws didn't protect a family member from a convicted drunk driver who made the disastrous decision to drive drunk again. I received that early morning knock at my door. My son Dustin was just 18 years old when an underage drunk and drug driver crashed into the Connecticut River. It was during one of those late night pizza runs that young teenagers usually go on. Dustin was in the back seat. I will tell you, he was sober. He was seatbelted. He drowned trying to escape that car, which went 35 feet in the air and over a cliff. He spent his last 10 minutes trying to escape that vehicle. With every breath he took, we knew it was getting closer, and I'm sure Dustin knew it was getting closer. One careless, selfish act, and my world changed forever. And that's why we're here today. We are going to stop this carnage to save families from the same heartache that myself and thousands of others, moms and dads, aunts and uncles, and guardians face each and every day. You'll have to indulge me if I get a little weepy, but I have to tell you, I love this state. My family's from this state. And while it took 8 years and a lot of hard work by these gentlemen and ladies behind me, today we are going to celebrate the passage of Pennsylvania's interlock law, but our work is not over. These devices only work when they are used. I'm going to say that again. Ignition interlocks only work when they are used. The implementation of this law and educating about the benefit will be critical to making sure the law is able to save lives in Pennsylvania. I want to see that 330 number get reduced very quickly. So let's talk about the benefits for a minute. Interlock offenders simply cannot drive drunk and hurt or kill innocent people. It's really that simple. Drunk driving doesn't discriminate. It will hit, kill, or injure anyone in its way. Ignition interlocks offer the absolutely only proven technology right now. It's the only thing that we have right now to be able to get people to separate drinking from driving. This small device will save lives on the roads of people on the roads in Pennsylvania. It's going to protect the public, and it's also going to protect the driver by preventing a car from starting if that driver is impaired by alcohol. That's why MAD believes all alcohol prevention and treatment programs for drunk driving offenders should include this ignition interlock. Here in Pennsylvania, for first offenders with a .10 BAC or higher, the ignition interlock will be required for 1 year. The advantage to the offender should be obvious. Driving privileges are restored as long as he or she does not attempt to drive after consuming alcohol. But there is a benefit for the rest of us that might not be as obvious to all of us. An all-offender ignition interlock law keeps offenders in the system, monitored by the device, and will not let them drink and drive. That is something that cannot be accomplished with the outdated practice of taking away a license and telling somebody not to drive. We know that doesn't work. Thank you, Senator Rafferty, and all your colleagues who voted to support a drunk driving law that will make a difference. Thank you for your stalwart support of MAD and for the safety of residents and visitors in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Thank you.
Before I came out, I was in conversation with Lieutenant Governor Mike Stack, who, when he was Senator Mike Stack, worked with us as well in this DUI legislation. He's very interested in it, was very happy to see it pass. And he asked me about next steps. And I said, well, there's a lot we have to do yet, including going after those repeat DUI offenders and getting mandatory jail time for them when they kill someone because of their foolish and irresponsible behavior. So that's our next step, working with our colleagues in the House. And we will continue to push for that here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Parents Against Impaired Driving were one of the motivating factors as well behind the passage of what we now know as Act 33. And with us today is Chris Demko. Chris has been a true partner, a true champion, and a patron to make sure that Act 33 has been implemented in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And I'm going to ask Chris to come forward and say a few words. Mr. Demko. And I want to recognize that Senator Dinniman has joined us as well, who knows Chris very well, and as a county commissioner and as a state senator has been very supportive of this legislation. Thanks, Chris.
Really don't have a lot to say, but I appreciate what everybody did up here in the Capitol to get this legislation passed, and I'd like to thank MAD as well. And as other people have said, this is just the first step. There's more to be done. Thank you.
In the Senate, it was good to have one of our newer members of the Senate, but a very effective, very active member of the Senate join us to make sure that this legislation passed, and it did unanimously. And I'd like to ask Senator Camera Bartolotta to say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'll be very, very quick. It's just such a pleasure to actually be one of the newest members and see something actually come out of this building that changes so very, very many lives. It's going to possibly save the 330 lives a year that are lost because of driving impaired. I was absolutely blessed to have some of these family members come and visit me this afternoon, and share with me their stories that no parent should ever have to hear. And that is about the death of their child. No one should ever go through that. And to be able to have something as simple as a device like this that will prevent someone from becoming a repeat offender. Because one thing that they shared with me today that was shocking is that it's usually about 80 times that someone will drive drunk before they're even caught and given a DUI. Imagine all of those lives that could be protected with just a small, simple device. I commend you, Senator Rafferty, the entire Transportation Committee, the House, for doing something that really is going to make a huge difference. I'm very proud to be here to see it. Thank you.
And I'm going to ask former County Commissioner, now Senator Andy Ditterman, who has been a very big supporter, to say a few words. Andy?
And I'll be brief because it's beginning to rain. I've been able to work with Senator Rafferty, and I just want to praise Senator Rafferty's leadership on this issue. And like so many things wouldn't get done in the Senate if there wasn't a leader. And John Rafferty got this done, and it was my pleasure to work with him. So let's thank John for the lives that are going to be saved in this Commonwealth.
This bill is smart on crime. It could not have been passed as quickly as it was, even though it took 6 years, and by the votes that it was, without the Mothers Against Drunk Driving, the PA Parents Against Impaired Driving, the PA DUI Association, our law enforcement community, Craig Stedman, as I had mentioned, and AAA. All were very supportive of this legislation being passed. Now, at the conclusion of the press conference, there's a car here right behind us on the deck here that you'll be able to see the ignition interlock system work firsthand. You'll see how it's installed in the machine. We have people here to explain it for you, for the press corps especially. So make sure you take the time. It's right behind us. We were very happy that Lieutenant Governor Stack arranged for us to be able to get the car here on the veranda here, and it's very appreciative of that. So I want to thank you all for being here today. If there are any quick questions before the rain comes, we'll be happy to answer. But once again, I want to thank my colleagues in the House and the Senate, and I especially want to thank MAD and the parents of loved ones who were taken from them because of drunk drivers' irresponsible behavior. So thank you very much for being here with us today. God bless us.